Then you want to sort of decide what's in the lake. Well, what are they eating? Are they eating crawdads? Are they eating bluegills? Are they eating shad? That's what you really want to figure out. And really, you can't go wrong pretty much on any California lake by imitating a crawdad. This is a standing yabby. This again is a river to sea bait that's over there for like $2 a pack that are normally $8, but it's probably one of the best crawdad imitators you'll see. I mean, that looks like a crawdad. It's molded from a crawdad. So when you work or when you're fishing one of these, you want to pretend it's a crawdad. You want that thing going to the bottom, and you just want to slow drag it across the bottom. You don't want to cause a lot of commotion with a crawdad. If we threw a bunch of crawdads in here, they'd just be hiding under the rocks, not drawing a lot of attention to themselves. I mean, you see a lot of people jerk a crawdad bait like that, and that's what they do when they're scared. But most of the time, a crawdad's sitting on the bottom trying not to be noticed. They don't want a bass to see them. They got great pinchers, they got a defense, but a largemouth bass will suck a crawdad in and crush it in 1 second if he's hungry enough. This is a great bait for that. Anytime you have very clear water like this, you want to get a bait that's so natural. This is about the right size. This is a 1/2 ounce. Throw it out, let it go all the way to the bottom, and then just drag it slow, hop it, whatever you need. Don't do a lot of movements with it, okay? A yabby or a little crawfish bait like this is just a tremendous tool to fish a little deeper. Let's say we're fishing up shallow, we haven't caught anything. These are the kind of baits I'm going to go a little deeper. Get it over the rocks, fish it slow, and basically you weigh the lure. So what I mean by that is you make that cast out there, let it settle to the bottom, and when you pick up that bait, it feels a certain way. Go back to the bottom. Same thing. Lift it up, it feels some certain way. By weighing the bait, I mean if you would go to pull it up and it feels different, feels heavier or lighter, it's probably a bass has it, okay? That's probably the hit. It's not necessarily going to yank the rod out of your hand. So you want to really pay attention when you're fishing these baits. Get a good fluorocarbon line and let that thing just move real slow down there. Don't be afraid to set the hook if you get a bite. And we don't have any hooks on this. I'm not going to hook any, but you can notice they do stare at it. They know something's up with it. They're just out of the delta. I mean, they're not really ready to eat. Probably by tomorrow they'll be chewing really good. But the bass definitely know when a crawdad bait gets in the water, because that's something they will eat every day of the year. Again, that's a yabby by River to Sea, right over there in the booth. Very good bait. And then probably my all-around deep water fishing bait, and one that I'm probably known the most for is just a football jig. This is a jig that's I designed for River to Sea called a Papa Murray jig, but it's actually one of my favorite jigs for deep water fishing. So many times of the year you go out there and these fish are just not living shallow. They are living in deep water. So what you need is a football jig, something you can get out there and fish deep water effectively. This is a 3/4 ounce football jig. Using a brown one, I'm using a little Jean LaRue trailer called a Biffle Bug. It's basically 2 little arms and a tail. It's just a good little movement bait. The key to the football jig, as opposed to the yabby, is now I have direct contact with the bottom. That lead head right there, I can feel what's on the bottom. When I saw that yabby, I couldn't really tell whether it was sand or rock or what it was, because I'm feeling the plastic. With a football jig, now I can tell what's down on the bottom. I can tell a hard bottom versus a soft bottom versus mud and sand. And sometimes that's the most important thing in jig fishing, is understanding where you're throwing this bait. What I like to do when I start with a football jig is start with a basic color, browns, orange, blacks. Make a long cast so it gets way out there, get it to the bottom, don't get snagged. Come on. I am on the bottom. There we go. Huh? I got it. I know there's no hooks on this thing, so I shouldn't really be hooked, you know. That's the funny thing. It's the heads that gets caught in the rocks. But that's what you want. You want that bait down there bouncing across the bottom, creating some commotion down there as far as tapping on the bottom, making some noise down there. That's what you want with a football jig. You want to be able to feel when you get into a rock patch. How many of you fish Clear Lake? Clear Lake's one of my favorites, and one of the big keys of Clear Lake is getting the areas that have rocks versus the areas that they're just sanded in or silted in. So a football jig, even if it's fairly shallow, is a great tool for that. Use a heavy football jig and drag that thing across that bottom, and when you start feeling that thing getting into the rocks, getting real, I'd say bumpy or getting real where you're snaggy, that's where you want to fish these jigs. That's where the crawdads live, and that's where these things want to be. So with a football jig, the key is really maintaining contact. I don't have a set retrieve for this. Most of the time it's just a simple let it go to the bottom and drag it, but sometimes I want it moved real quick like that. Stroked up off the bottom, and they'll hit it on the fall. Really, again, when you're fishing any of these lures, make sure you let those fish tell you exactly what they want. If they're not chasing, you want to slow that thing down. One of my favorite techniques this time of year is called counting rocks. Well, basically, you're using about a 7.5 foot rod, 15-pound fluorocarbon line, probably a 3/4 ounce jig, and just move that thing where you're just literally counting those rocks down there, moving it so slowly. And I've seen time after time, it doesn't matter what color, it didn't matter what style, but if you didn't have your retrieve down where you're just barely moving that bait, bass this time of year just are not going to be interested. These fish are a little warmer than some of the lakes around, but normally right now the metabolism of a bass is so slow, they do not want a lot of movement. Leave that thing down there. Anything that changes, anything that gets heavy, anything that gets light, set that hook, okay? That's the key to fishing the jig. All right, that's the football jig.